Basic Braining is one of those tutorial levels that no matter how many times you play through it, you'll always find something that you may not have noticed the first time around, and I would go so far as to say that it does an incredible job at fully establishing who Coach Oleander is as a character, while subtly hinting at some of the more complex nuances to his character that he does everything in his power to keep hidden. And so I figured that now was as good a time as any to take a side portal into the genius of Coach Oleander's Basic Braining. Now, to truly understand what's going on in the mind of Coach Oleander, we first need to acknowledge that almost everything in this mental world is a facade. While Coach Oleander parades himself as a military veteran in every conceivable facet, from the clothes he wears, to the way he speaks, to the construction of his mental world being based entirely around his most extreme military experiences, when we really start deconstructing this though, especially with the knowledge that we have from later in the game, this charade begins cracking and fully falling apart. In Basic Braining, there are two memory vaults that we're able to get access to. The first one is Oleander's Pride, that he quite literally presents to the campers moving through his mind, which shows his heroic endeavors in the military, from planting flags in the ground, to running through minefields with planes overhead, to jumping out of planes with guns blazing, to riding what appears to be a torpedo while holding a pistol and an anchor, to providing first aid to a child, and finally illustrating himself as a decorated military vet, flanked by troops, tanks, battleships, and planes, all the while looking very tall, much taller than we know him to be. Sure, it seems over the top and almost like it was dreamed up by someone who has only watched action movies about people in the military and never actually served themselves. But hey, we're in another person's brain, so who's to say what is and isn't realistic in the world of Psychonauts? I'm sure it's just a coincidence that there are projectors all throughout the level playing B-roll from what appears to be army recruitment films or military documents or something like that. When we first see this memory vault, I think that most players will pretty much take what Coach Oleander is sharing with us at face value, with the odd height discrepancy just being his own perception of himself. I mean, look at his mental world. It's entirely focused on his military career from top to bottom. Why would he lie about something that seems so fundamental to who he is as a character? Well, what we don't see on this first run through though is the memory vault that's tucked away behind a mental cobweb, which, just as a reminder, mental cobwebs manifest when a portion of an individual's mind hasn't been used in a long time. It's in this mental vault that we see Oleander's shame, which illustrates him going to enlist in the military, but after being deemed too short, he's kicked out of the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, and even from working in the mess hall for the military. And after all of this rejection, we see him shaking his fist in anger at all of those who had rejected him. Okay, so this just means that Oleander's a liar then, right? Well, I don't think it's that simple. While we may not have realized it during our first run through with Raz, Coach Oleander's mind is full of strange idiosyncrasies that would have been impossible to notice without context of the end of the game. But when you replay through this first level, the true mental state of Coach Oleander is laid bare for us. And I think that the most interesting aspect of this is the fact that the memory of this rejection isn't really hidden from the campers, as it could have easily been kept much further out of sight, kind of like what Mia Vodello does, but instead it's just covered by mental cobwebs out in the open. We can see it, we just can't reach it, meaning that he truly has not accessed the memories of these rejections in a long time, to the degree that mental cobwebs have cropped up over top of them without him even being truly cognizant of this fact. Instead, Oleander has fully embraced and committed to his false memories of being in the military, or or I guess to be more accurate, his memories of what he thinks being in the military would have been like. Later in the game, when Raz is talking with Sasha 9, Sasha mentions that all healthy minds have sensors. However, Basic Braining is the only mind in the entirety of Psychonauts that does not have a single sensor present within it. Even Boyd's mind, while for the majority of the time playing through it is devoid of sensors, has them show up eventually, but Oleander's never does it. This leads me to believe that between some trauma that we're going to talk about here in a second, and the repression of his past failure having shoved it down so far, this ultimately led to him adopting this hyper-militarized persona that he had created for himself, as opposed to accepting the reality of his failure to join the military. But why would he do this? Essentially, Oleander's obsession with joining the military, and eventually his desire to take over the world, can all be traced back to a moment in his childhood which is outlined in the memory vault, the Big Top, which can be found in the Meat Circus level of the game. This memory vault shows just how much Oleander, as a child, loved bunnies, with him developing a particularly close bond with one bunny in particular. But his father, who works as a butcher, didn't see any value in these rabbits outside of being a source of food. And so, to teach Oleander a lesson, he killed the bunny right in front of the young coach's eyes, which ended up being an incredibly impactful and understandably traumatizing moment in Oleander's life. And with this context in mind, as we explore through Basic Braining, while yes, much of the window dressing is exactly what Oleander wants us to see, some of his subconscious is peeking through in ways that are subtle yet telling. The very first thing Raz comes in contact with in this level is a recruitment center, where he's watching a tape of Coach Oleander. Now, this room seems pretty innocuous at first glance. I mean, the only things decorating the space are the desk with the projector on it, 2 Psychonauts flags, and some enlistment posters. And it's these posters I want to focus on, though, because while for the most part they just say things like military, join now, or a play on Uncle Sam's We Want You poster, there are 2 that say, I wish I were a man, that picture Oleander and a woman. While this could just be seen as a sexist, misogynistic poster that indicates that the woman in the picture wants to be more of a man like Oleander, I think that this could be more accurately interpreted as a subconscious reflection of Oleander's own insecurities. Just think, he grew up with a father who, at least in Oleander's memory, brutally and knowingly murdered Oleander's pet bunny, and he was powerless to do anything to stop it. Pair this with the fact that when he became an adult, he wanted nothing more than to join the military in any way, shape, or form, even if it meant working in the kitchen. This was likely, and I am putting words in Oleander's mouth here, at least subconsciously, so that he could be strong enough to protect everything that he cared about moving forward. But he was denied from every branch for being too short. I don't think it would be a stretch to say that his self-esteem likely hit rock bottom after this. In essence, the trauma he experienced throughout his life led him to create and hide behind this soldier persona as a way to protect himself from any further harm, rejection, or judgment. And so this poster that says, I wish I were a man, could very likely indicate that he does not see himself as conforming to what he believes to be the archetypal picture of masculinity that he wishes he was. And we can see what he wishes he was through the false memory vault. And so after leaving the recruitment office, Raz begins to actually engage with the mental obstacle course. And there are odd outliers here and there that have snuck past the coach's cognitive filters, such as a figment of a meat cleaver. While most of the other figments of the coach's imagination that are present are nothing really to write home about, with them being soldiers, tanks, planes, stuff like that, the meat cleaver is a clear allusion to his father, with him understandably linking the cleaver to one of the most traumatic moments of his life that he can't get out of his subconscious no matter how hard he tries. Raz will also come across a meat plant at about the midpoint of the level, and for the longest time I was so confused about why there were meat plants growing in his mind. And then I found out what his name actually means. So Coach Oleander's first name is Merceau, which when translated will either refer to a morsel of meat or a short literary or musical composition, which is kind of a 1-2 punch, referencing the fact that his father's a butcher and the fact that the dude is short. Pair this with that oleander is a type of plant that's leaves are incredibly toxic to humans, and now these little meat plants that are cropping up are beginning to make a lot more sense, because if you combine his first and last name, we've got a toxic plant that looks like a morsel of meat in the mind of a toxic man who is short and vaguely looks like ham. But name etymology aside, another place where his subconscious is seeping into his highly curated, militarized mental world is in the field where there is a turret that will fire on Raz. It's here that there are several cute little bunnies that can get caught in the crossfire and brutally killed. Remind you of something? But to cap it all off, if you look at the white room in Oleander's mind where his blueprints for the brain tumbler are held, you can see bunnies adorning the baseboard of this room. And while this may just be my interpretation again, and not intended by the developers at all, I think it's really interesting that bunnies still adorn the most stark white, pure, and peaceful room, with the only other color that is explicitly shown to be present being a blood red curtain that is hiding the means to his vengeance on the world for rejecting him at every turn. And this is a piece of his mind that he is very aware of and has full control over, as is referenced by the fact that when we go back into this mental world, he has boarded it up so that no one else can get back in. I don't think it's a stretch to say that throughout this game, Coach Oleander's inflated sense of importance, power, and capability is more of a defense mechanism than anything, and in fact, more than likely stems from his suffocating insecurity and feelings of powerlessness and rejection throughout the course of his life. All in all, it feels like Coach Oleander was based around the idea of the Napoleon complex, which is also known as Napoleon syndrome or short man syndrome. The general idea behind this being that it's normally attributed to men of short stature with overly aggressive or domineering social behavior. For all intents and purposes, it implies that this behavior is meant to compensate for the individual's physical and or social shortcomings. And while I need to stress that this is not an empirically backed psychological phenomenon, and there are many researchers that dismiss it as a myth, and others that believe that they've found evidence of its validity. Either way though, it's not a formal diagnosis by any stretch of the imagination, and we shouldn't put too much stock in it in real life. With that said though, in this game, I can't help but think of Coach Oleander as the poster child for the Napoleon complex. And that's saying something when Napoleon is quite literally in the game himself. When it comes down to it, the mental turmoil of Coach Oleander is at the epicenter of the plot of the original Psychonauts. And so working through this initial mental world as a tutorial, while still getting hints of what is to come, is what I believe makes this such a good game. Because these mental worlds, while they are undeniably chaotic in their own special ways, are all built with an intentionality that is astonishingly well realized for a 2005 3D platformer. And even beyond how this level is able to give a lot of context into the character of Coach Oleander, which is further explored in other levels throughout the course of the game, it can't be understated how fun this tutorial is. This is one of the only times in the franchise that we see Raz interacting with other psychics in real time as he explores this obstacle course. And that's something that I really wish we saw more of. Whether it was leading Dogen through a minefield, having Clem and Crystal cheering for us whether we like it or not, or beating the snot out of Bobby Zilch while rail grinding. It really makes you feel like this camp is alive and sets the scene for the entirety of the game. Because let's be honest, the reason to return to Psychonauts, well yes, it's many of the mental worlds, but it's the camp setting that is really special. And so I think that the genius of this level really lies in how well it not only introduces the primary antagonist of the game, but also how it masterfully kicks off our stay at the Whispering Rocks Psychic Summer Camp by allowing us to complete our own basic braining.